To Congressman Brad Schneider of Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for calling this meeting. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. It's good to see you guys, as always. Maybe I'll start with Dr. Pollack. When did the U.S. designate Hezbollah and Hamas as terrorist organizations? Do you remember?
I cannot answer that. I am sorry, Congressman.
I can't. I looked it up, so but it was October 8th, 1997. Was the U.S. right to designate Hezbollah and Hamas as terrorist organizations?
Absolutely.
Anyone want to disagree with that? Was the U.S. right to designate the Houthis as a terrorist organization? Dr. Pollack.
Yes, I would say they would. They certainly meet the definition.
Yeah. I think where we find ourselves, I'm going to just tell my wife I can't take her call right now, where we find ourselves, we face an immediate crisis with global implications. The Houthis are threatening global trade. They are citing excuses, but I think, as you guys noted, that they are achieving their own goals, covering up their inability to govern. And we need to address that crisis with great urgency. But there's also a longer-term crisis that has more local implications, regional implications, which is the crisis facing Yemen and the governance of Yemen, creating one of the largest, if not the largest, humanitarian crisis in the world. And the victims of this are the people of Yemen. And you know, the Houthis have their own agenda, but it is certainly not to lift up the people of Yemen. I mentioned Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. Is there a common thread to those three organizations, Dr. Pollack?
Well, let's see. They all start with H in English.
That's not what I had in mind, and you know that.
They are all backed by Iran.
Right.
They are all anti-American groups. They are all anti-Israel groups. They all employ violence against civilians to achieve their ends.
Yep. And I'm going to quote from your prepared comments, but Iran is our enemy not because we want them to be, but because the government of Iran wants us to be. Can the same be true of the Houthis?
Absolutely. I think, as you know well, their slogan is, God is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews, victory to Islam.
Right. And in fact, as they cheer that and chant that cheer, they're saluting. And their salute is not the typical salute we think of, but it's the Nazi salute. The Houthis are anti-American, anti-Israel, and anti-Semitic. And they are a threat, as I mentioned, to the region, but also a threat to the people of Yemen. Dr. Altman, you know, one of the things we have to do is not just interdict Iran from supporting the Houthis, but find a way to end that support. Any suggestions on what we can do in Congress to try to address that and change that support?
I think partly it's important to recall that the Houthis aren't really strategic for the Iranians. The Houthis are a little bit of a freebie. The Houthis only cost the Iranians maybe about $100 million a year, which is about twice what it costs to run a think tank in Washington. But very impactful, as you've said. And I think we have to persuade the Iranians that the Houthis aren't worth it, and I worry that instead we're persuading the Iranians the Houthis are totally worth it because we're getting wrapped around the axle and talking about a whole regional program. And I'm saying this, they are a regional threat, as you say, but I think we have to right-size the nature of the Houthi threat. I think degrading their military capabilities is the right thing, but getting into a war of wills over the Houthis, I worry, is going to leave them victorious and looking strong and us looking weak.
And I'm running out of time, and I forget which of you said it, but you used the term coercion. And Dr. Pollack, coercion is convincing, whether it's the Houthis or the Iranians, that the cost of the actions they're taking are far greater, or are far less. No, the benefits of the actions they're taking are far less than the costs. And we have to work to ratchet up the consequences and the costs for both the Houthis and the Iranians to change their course, because we can't allow the Houthis to disrupt global trade and that is an interest not just for the United States, but for all of our allies. And we can't allow what's happening today to end hope for the people of Yemen who are suffering and deserve the right to govern themselves. I'm over my time. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Congressman Brad Schneider. We now proceed to Congress.
I appreciate the witnesses' willingness to be here and to point out some very important things to us, both strategically and morally, that I think will affect the future of the United States and global peace, which is ultimately what every warrior wants. Anybody who's ever put their life on the line to go overseas for their nation does not want war. I don't want my sons to go serve overseas and die. I want them to live. I want them to live in peace. With that, I think it's very important to recognize what we've done and what the consequences are. In February of 2021, the Biden administration removed the Houthis, which were on the Foreign Terrorist Organization designation and their specially designated global terrorist group designation when the Trump administration had put it in place. At the time, Secretary Blinken cited humanitarian concerns as the reasons for these decisions, saying that the humanitarian aid could not reach the Yemeni people if these designations remain in place. I want to make a few points. I went on the first freshman Codell to Bangladesh, the largest refugee camp in the world. 1 million people that have been displaced through violence, who are living off of now $8 per person per month. There's people all over, we have a record number of refugees all over the world right now, starving, displaced, being raped, being killed constantly. And yet we're more worried about idealism than realism when it comes to who we aid and who we abet. And this is the problem. When we talk about worrying about designations so that we can help a people that the money's not even getting to, that the help's not even getting to when you have an evil regime that's keeping the food from getting to the people who need it most. And instead, we've created an environment where the Iranians
Stop the genocide. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire. That will help people. 30,000 dead. 30,000 dead. Blood is on your hands.
when we're talking about realism and who we're trying to assist and who we're trying to claim as our friends.
We should not be assisting a genocide. Ceasefire now. Free Palestine. American taxpayers don't want this to happen.
I think it goes without saying that I'll reclaim my time. Okay, very good. Thank you. Ms. Leedon, do you believe that the Biden administration's reasoning for removing the Houthis from the FTO designation was accurate and the correct step in addressing the humanitarian crisis in Yemen?
No, I do not.
Do you think that the aid that has been forthcoming goes to the right people?
No, I do not.
Exactly my point. I think we need to be more concerned in supporting the resistance in Iran, for example. Those people who would stand up against the injustices against women and children, against education, against rights.
Out of your mouth, you absolute disgrace. You should all be ashamed of yourself. Ceasefire now. No more money to Israel. This isn't complicated. You absolute disgrace for human beings.
And there we go with the absolute misunderstanding of realism versus idealism. Iran is an evil regime. It's a theocracy that oppresses its people. It has kept women from their natural God-given rights. And yet we're more concerned with not getting food to the people that when we give aid to these corrupt agencies than we are with a resistance to a regime that's actually supporting all of our enemies all around the world and actually trying to kill Americans to the hundreds and thousands of efforts with armed aggression towards our troops overseas. We've lost Navy SEALs, we've lost Army National Guard, we've lost American lives, and we've put them in jeopardy every single day for the last, not just several months, but several years because of our policy. Dr. Pollack, how would you explain the Biden administration's seemingly timid defensive response to the Houthi aggression? Is it fair to speculate that it's due in part to the administration's desire to revive the Iran nuclear deal?
Congressman, first, I would encourage you to have the administration come and defend its own policies. But since you've asked me to speculate, I can certainly do so. I do suspect that that is part of what is going on. I think that they are hoping that at some point they can get back to it. And I think that, just broadly speaking, their approach has been to assume that negotiations are most likely when you start by making concessions to the other side. I understand the logic behind that, but historically, I don't think that it is ever proven to be accurate. People come to the table when they have a reason to do so. If you remove that reason for coming to the table, they either don't come or they show up not believing that they have to actually make concessions.
Well put, sir. It's been my experience in my over 20 years of Marine Corps and Navy experience around the world, whether it be in Africa, the Middle East, or the Far East, or anywhere else we're in combatant zones, that evil people only understand one thing, and that's strength. And that's what creates peace, not weakness, not concessions. And I think whether it be President Carter, President Obama, or President Biden, what I've seen is every time we give concessions, bad things are the result. And therefore, I would encourage my allies on both sides of the aisle, and I think we've made really good points from both sides of the aisle, to recognize evil and to deal with it accordingly. And with that, I yield.
From our distinguished witnesses today.
Thank you, Senator Collins. First up, we'll have Secretary Austin. Appreciate you being here, Mr. Secretary. You have the floor.
Chairman Tisser, Ranking Member Collins, distinguished members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to testify in support of President Biden's proposed fiscal year 2025 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm pleased to be joined by our outstanding Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, and by Undersecretary Mike McCord, the Department's Comptroller. Let me start by thanking this committee for all that you do to support the U.S. military, our troops, and our military families. As Secretary, I've always been guided by three priorities: defending our nation, taking care of our people, and succeeding through teamwork. Our budget request for fiscal year 2025 will advance all three of these priorities. First, the President's request will invest in cutting-edge capabilities across all domains. That includes $48.1 billion for naval and shipbuilding capabilities, $61.2 billion to reinforce U.S. air dominance, and $13 billion to bolster Army and Marine Corps combat capabilities. Our request will also provide $33.7 billion to strengthen our space architecture and $14.5 billion to develop and field advanced cybersecurity tools. It will direct $49.2 billion to modernize and recapitalize all three legs of our nuclear triad. And it will sharpen our tech edge through a $167.5 billion investment in procurement and $143.2 billion in R&D. Second, this budget request will support our outstanding troops and their families. That includes raising base pay and housing allowances, investing in better housing, making child care more affordable, and funding vital work to prevent sexual assault and suicide in the military. And third, this request will help the department further deepen our teamwork worldwide. Our network of allies and partners remains a strategic advantage that no competitor can match. And you can see its power in our strengthening ties across the Indo-Pacific, and in today's expanded and united NATO, and in the 50-country Ukraine Defense Contact Group that I convene. Our budget remains rooted in our 2022 National Defense Strategy. Our request positions the United States to tackle the department's pacing challenge, the People's Republic of China, with confidence and urgency. It will help meet the acute threat of Putin's increasingly aggressive Russia. It will help us tackle the persistent dangers from Iran and its proxies. It will help us take on the threats from North Korea and global terrorist organizations and other malign actors, and it will help us continue to deter aggression against the United States and our allies and partners, and to prevail in combat if necessary. Now today I want to underscore three key messages. First, even as our budget request abides by the mandatory caps set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it is aligned to our strategy. We made tough but responsible decisions that prioritize near-term readiness, modernization of the joint force, and support for our troops and their families. Our approach dials back some near-term modernization for programs not set to come online until the 2030s. Second, we can only fully reach the goals of our strategy with your help. And I'm grateful that Congress passed the fiscal year 2024 appropriations in March. And the single greatest way that Congress can support the department is to pass predictable, sustained, and timely appropriations. My third and final message is that the price of U.S. leadership is real, but it is far lower than the price of U.S. abdication. As the President has said, we're in a global struggle between democracy and autocracy, and our security relies on American strength of purpose.
Our government support for Israel's genocide, sir. Israel is committing war crimes with U.S. weapons. It is committing war crimes repeatedly and in violation of U.S. law. It has now invaded Rafah, sir. Will your legacy be a live-stream genocide, sir? Will the legacy of the United States?
You may proceed.
And our security relies on American strength of purpose, and that's why our budget request seeks to invest in American security and in America's defense industrial base. The same is true for the recently passed National Security Supplemental that will support our partners in Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and make key investments to increase submarine production. In fact, about $50 billion of this supplemental will flow through our defense industrial base, creating good jobs in more than 30 states. So we're grateful for our partners in Congress who help us make the investments needed to strengthen America's security through both the supplemental and the President's budget requests. The United States military is the most lethal fighting force on earth, and with your help, we're going to keep it that way. I deeply appreciate your support for our mission and our troops, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Secretary Austin, thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll have General Brown. General Brown, you have the floor.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of the committee. I'm honored to join Secretary Austin and the Honorable Mike McCord to appear before you today. On behalf of the Joint Force, Department of Defense civilians, and our families, I want to thank Congress for your steadfast support and the opportunity to testify on the fiscal year 2025 defense budget requests, which reflects our shared commitment to national security. I also want to thank you for passing the National Security Supplemental, which provides vital support to our allies, partners, and our defense industrial base to counter aggression and strengthen our joint force capabilities and capacity in preparation for any future contingency. The global security environment is increasingly complex. The 2022 National Defense Strategy identifies 5 key challenges. The People's Republic of China, our pacing challenge, continue its risky behavior around the globe. A newly aggressive Russia with its unprovoked war against Ukraine. A reckless Iran, who we saw a few weeks ago, attempts to escalate regional conflict with unprecedented attacks in support of proxy forces. A destabilizing North Korea, which threatens regional security, and violent extremist organizations which leverage instability to advance their cause. These challenges are interconnected, which demands a strategic approach addressing the immediate threats while also preparing for future contingencies. It requires all of us to operate with a sense of urgency. Days after becoming the chairman, I laid out 3 expectations in my message to the Joint Force. Honing our warfighting skills has primacy in all we do. Modernizing and aggressively leading with new approaches, new concepts and approaches, and trust is the foundation of our profession. Our military exists to fight and win our nation's wars. We train every day to ensure we are so good at what we do that we deter any adversary for engaging U.S. in conflict. This budget requests $147 billion to sustain readiness and ensure the department can counter near-term threats. We're also focused on better integrating our allies and partners in our planning and operations by investing in critical programs and capability, expanding security cooperation, exercises, training, and interoperability. Our investments in readiness ensure the joint force can respond when the nation calls. While we are focused on our readiness for today, it is critical to modernize and lead with new concepts to prepare for tomorrow. The Department continues to invest in capability and capacity to outpace our competitors while transforming from costly legacy platforms that are no longer relevant to the threat. This budget strategically invests $167.5 billion in procurement, underscoring our commitment to equip the joint force with unparalleled combat capabilities across every domain. This budget also invests $143.2 billion in research, development, tests, and evaluation of future capabilities that will retain our strategic edge. Finally, this budget invests significantly into nuclear modernization, digital innovation, multi-year procurement of critical munitions, and the strengthened defense industrial base. With rapidly evolving threats and technologies, accelerating our modernization is crucial. Lastly, trust is the foundation of our profession. Joint force must build upon and uphold the trust in each other, trust of our families, trust of our elected leaders, and trust of our nation. Enhancing the quality of service and the quality of life of our personnel is not just a moral obligation, it's a strategic imperative. The budget includes investments in quality of service efforts such as advanced training, educational benefits, and career development, while also investing in quality of life projects like housing, medical clinics, and child care facilities, as well as funding spouse employment initiatives, enhanced mental health resources, and robust programs to combat sexual assault. We must create an environment where all can reach their full potential. Trust that our joint force stands ready to defend our national interests, ready to deter aggression, and ready, if necessary, to fight and win our nation's wars. I thank you for your support and collaboration and our shared commitment to face the security challenges of today and prepare for tomorrow. We're living in consequential times, and there's no time to waste. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your statement, General Brown, and there will be probably...
Mr. Chairman, welcome, Ms. Secretary. So a statement was made yesterday offering condolences to the passing of the president of Iran, Mr. Raisi. He died in a helicopter crash. He was a protege of the supreme leader who earned his nickname, the Butcher of Tehran, for his role in mass executions of thousands in 1988. His tenure as president was marked by the brutal repression of women and girls, the enrichment of uranium, a violent crackdown on mass protest in 2022, and direct attacks on Israel from Iranian soil. I'd like to offer my condolences to the victim of the Butcher of Tehran. To the Iranian people, we stand with you and hope and pray for the day of your liberation comes from the Ayatollah and his henchmen. As to the world, is pretty much on fire. It seems to be not a good time now to take resources off the table that can prevent things from getting worse. The World Food Program has doubled the number of people it serves in 2 years. Now, does that matter to you at home? Yes, it does. If people can't eat and can't feed their family, they're likely to do almost anything. What would you do to feed your family? So I don't want to help the terrorists. I want to make their life more difficult. This is a very small percentage of overall federal spending, and every time I turn around, we seem to want to cut this program. You know, I'm a pretty hawkish guy, but soft power matters. I've been to all over the world, most of you. A little bit of money spent well goes a long way. Feeding people keeps them from moving around and migrating and creating pressure on neighboring countries. So you're either going to pay now or you're going to pay later. So I'm hoping that the Congress will recognize that the investments we make in this account are national security in another form. And if you don't get that by now, you have missed a lot. As to the war in Israel, I stand with Israel without apology. I hope one day to be able to end this conflict in a way where the Palestinian people have hope they don't have today, and Israel have security it deserves, and maybe we can integrate the region with a deal with Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I've enjoyed working with you, Mr. Secretary, on trying to find a way to normalize between Saudi Arabia and Israel and having a Palestinian component. I look forward to that. In the middle of all this, the International Criminal Court, out of nowhere, decided to indict or issue an arrest warrant for the Prime Minister of Israel, an elected leader by one of the most robust democracies on the planet. If you don't like the government in Israel, stick around. They change every 3 or 4 months. They have one of the most robust judiciaries anywhere on the planet, known for their independence. I have been working with many members of this committee to talk with the International Criminal Court. Number one, we believe that you've overstepped your mandate. Where's the complementarity? So Israel is not a member of the ICC. For some reason, they granted state status to the Palestinians in 2015 when nobody else has, and they're now claiming jurisdiction over the state of Israel. Under the Rome Statute, before the ICC can act, it limits the action, ICC action, situations when a nation is unable or unwilling to proceed with an investigation or if the investigation is conducted in bad faith. Now, you must have concluded that the judiciary in Israel they don't act in good faith. I would assure you that if you do wrong in the IDF, you can get court-martialed like you can here. The ICC was never meant for missions like this. So there was a meeting to be discussed yesterday. May 20th, a representative of the ICC was supposed to land in Israel at 6 o'clock to set up a meeting between Israel and the prosecutor, ICC prosecutor, to talk about what Israel's doing, what concerns the ICC has, to invoke complementarity. Well, what happened? Israel was informed that the people from the ICC never boarded the plane, and we find out that the ICC prosecutor, Mr. Khan, had done an interview with CNN days before, or hours before, I think it's days before, saying he was going to issue arrest warrants for the defense minister and the prime minister. That's not good faith. I was on a phone call with 8 members of the United States Senate asking the ICC at least to talk to Israel before you move forward. They gave Venezuela 9 months. Clearly, we were lied to and misled. You had done an interview with CNN before the plane was to depart. So the idea you're going to collaborate apparently was a sham. So we, hopefully, together will find a way to register our displeasure with the ICC, because if they'll do this to Israel, we're next. This group tried to come after our soldiers. Yeah, you can clap all you want to. They tried to come after our soldiers in Afghanistan, but reason prevailed. So at the end of the day here, what I hope to happen is that we level sanctions against the ICC for this outrage to not only help our friends in Israel, but protect ourselves over time. Mr. Secretary, your statement yesterday was excellent. The President's statement was excellent. Senator Schumer's statement on the floor was excellent about the outrage here. They have destroyed the notion of complementarity. They have misled people in the United States Senate about their intention, and they shall and will pay a price. Mr. Secretary, I appreciate what you've said. It is now time for us to act. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Graham, Vice Chair Collins, Chair Murray, very good to be with all of you today on this committee. I thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to testify before you. And
I recognize people feel passionately. We must have order in this room. We are going to proceed with this hearing. Mr. Secretary, you may resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank you also for your partnership in working together to advance American leadership in the world, leadership that's so essential for delivering on the priorities that matter to our people at home. I think the need for our global leadership and cooperation with allies and partners.
Witness will suspend until the room is cleared of protesters. That's 2. Mr. Secretary, you may proceed.
Chairman, thank you. So I was saying the need for our leadership and cooperation with allies and partners has never been greater. The People's Republic of China is pursuing military, economic, and geopolitical preeminence, challenging our vision for a free, open, secure, and prosperous international order. Russia is committing aggression not only against Ukraine, but against the principles at the heart of the UN Charter: independence, territorial integrity, sovereignty, that are the building blocks for global peace and security. In the Middle East, We're standing with Israel in its efforts to ensure that what happened on October 7th never happens again, as we do everything we can to bring to an end the terrible human suffering in Gaza and prevent the conflict from spreading. U.S. leadership is needed to address humanitarian crises elsewhere around the world.
Witness may suspend until we can clear the room. Mr. Secretary, you may resume.
Thank you. Our leadership is needed to address humanitarian crises elsewhere around the world, including in Sudan, in Haiti, where millions have been displaced, many killed, and to address global issues that no country can solve alone, including food security, the changing climate, transnational corruption, and the fentanyl crisis. But with the support of Congress, we can and we are approaching these challenges from a position of strength. Because of the actions we've taken, the United States is stronger economically, diplomatically, militarily than we were a few years ago. We've made historic investments here at home in our competitiveness, in our innovation, in our infrastructure. We've renewed our alliances. We've built new ones. We've secured unprecedented alignment with key partners in Europe, in Asia, and beyond. We've delivered essential American aid to Ukraine, and we've rallied the international community to share the burden. For every dollar that we've spent in economic and development assistance, others have collectively invested 3 more. Now, many doubted that bipartisan support for Ukraine and other urgent national security priorities could endure. But last month, Congress demonstrated to the world that we would not pull back. You passed the President's supplemental funding bill by an overwhelming margin and on a bipartisan basis. Our investment abroad does not come at the expense of our strength at home. Far from it. Most of the supplemental is being spent here in the United States, building up our own defense industrial base, supporting thousands of American jobs. We need to keep up this momentum, and that requires a State Department and a budget that we fully resource so that we can meet the challenges of our time. And I think, as Senator Graham put it, in effect, an ounce of prevention is well worth more than a pound of cure. And we know that if we don't get these problems on the takeoff, we're going to have to deal with them on the landing, but in much more costly and difficult ways. The FY25 budget that the President's putting forward, requesting $58.8 billion to the State Department and USAID, does this in 2 ways. First, it funds the essential missions of our department and USAID. The budget will ensure that the United States continues to be the partner of choice that countries can turn to when they need to solve big problems, but problems that also affect us. In an era of renewed great power competition, we've got to present the strongest possible offer, one that is relevant and responsive to countries' needs and that advances our security and economic interests. That's why, for example, we're requesting $2 billion for a new fund to build high-quality, sustainable infrastructure around the world. Crucially, these kinds of investments create jobs for Americans and expand markets for our businesses overseas. We're requesting resources for the World Bank. With $1 billion in U.S. funding, we can unlock another $36 billion in development fund capacity to direct to the top priorities of emerging economies. That's a huge return on our investment and essential, again, for competing with China around the world. The budget also includes $1.7 billion for international organizations, including the United Nations, APEC, the Inter-American Development Bank, to help shape them in ways that reflect our interests and values. We're asking for $500 million to give more people around the world access to secure internet and digital technologies. Doing so will support the U.S. economy through the export of our technology products. It will help us ensure that we and our fellow democracies remain the leaders and standard setters in key technologies like artificial intelligence. The budget includes funding to address global issues that affect the lives and livelihoods of the American people, as well as people around the world, especially the synthetic drug crisis. It also funds our response to irregular migration, global food insecurity, public health, climate, and energy security. And again, if these problems are not addressed up front, inevitably, they're going to have an impact on us down the road. We're also asking Congress to fully fund the State Department's educational and cultural exchanges. These are really one of our best and most cost-effective tools for advancing U.S. values and interests around the world, and they support the students, the researchers, the young professionals from our communities who study and work abroad. To outcompete our strategic rivals, we also need to invest in the foundation of our strength abroad, our diplomatic corps, and that's the second pillar of the budget. Our budget makes a strong investment in expanding our overseas presence, opening posts in the Pacific Islands, the Eastern Caribbean. It will also continue our modernization of American diplomacy. We are reorganizing the department to make sure that it is ready to face the challenges of this time. We're attracting and working to retain the best possible talent. We're investing in our people in Washington and in posts overseas with training, with technology. We're promoting more agility, more innovation, more efficiency in the processes that we bring to bear. Last year's enacted budget level represented a 5% cut from the year before. That challenges our efforts to deliver the results that Congress and the American people deserve. So I urge you to support this budget, which helps us address the most pressing foreign policy priorities for the coming year and lays the foundation for strong American leadership in the years beyond. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Cruz.
Anti-Semitism is a unique historic form of evil, and over millennia it is manifested in violence, mass murder, and genocide. October 7th was one of the darkest days in human history when terrorists murdered over 1,200 Israelis and took 251 hostages. Women and girls were raped. It was the single largest mass murder of Jews in a day since the Holocaust. In the wake of October 7th, we have seen anti-Semitism explode across the United States and across the world, but especially on college campuses. As the ADL has illustrated, from 2022 to 2023, the number of anti-Semitic incidents more than doubled in the United States. But college campuses in particular have become vile incubators of hatred of Jews. At Cornell University, in the aftermath of October 7th, one student made vile threats, including statements such as, "If I see a pygmalion Jew, I will stab you and slit your throat. If I see another female Jew, I will drag you away and rape you and throw you off a cliff." A student organization at California State University, Long Beach, circulated a flyer calling for a, quote, day of resistance in celebration of October 7th. You will note on the flyer is an image of a person parachuting with a fan attached, a direct reference to and a glorification of Hamas terrorists that used gliders to descend upon a music festival and murder 260 innocent people and take many more hostages. At Columbia University, the situation got so bad that the Orthodox rabbi on campus, Rabbi L.A. Buechler, had to make this public statement. Columbia University's public safety cannot guarantee Jewish students' safety in the face of extreme anti-Semitism and anarchy. It deeply pains me to say that I would strongly recommend you return home. This was directed to Jewish students as soon as possible and remain home. The rabbi had every reason to be concerned. At Columbia's campus, individuals yelled, "We love Hamas, we're all Hamas, long live Hamas." At the University of Washington, the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors was told that she was called names, she was spit at, she was laughed at. She said she no longer felt safe on campus, and she was told to go back to the gas chambers. This is sick and horrific. At Columbia, when Jewish students were engaged in displaying the American flag and the Israeli flag, another student wearing a mask because these protesters are oh so brave, they almost always cover their face, held up a handwritten sign saying Al-Qassam's next target. Al-Qassam is the military arm of Hamas. According to social media, this particular student is a wealthy student from Georgia. She's not Palestinian, but she has been taught lies and hatred, and she feels perfectly comfortable advocating the murder of her fellow students at Columbia. At MIT, students have reported they feel unsafe to go to class. And the MIT president has said that she would not discipline the students making those threats because if she did, they risk losing their visas and being deported. Throughout all of this, the Biden-Harris administration has been utterly absent. Does anyone doubt if the Klan were on college campuses terrorizing African-American students, threatening African-American students, that we would see the FBI there, that we would see prosecutors there, that we would see federal funding cut off to universities? Of course we would, and we should. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, the Democrats have a problem. I would note, this is occurring in blue states with blue governors because the Democrat Party is terrified of the pro-Hamas wing of their party. In states like Texas and Florida, we don't allow this. At the University of Texas, when violent protesters threatened Jewish students, police officers arrived and arrested them. That's what happened when you enforce the law. Every Republican member of this committee asked the chairman to hold a hearing on anti-Semitism in February. And yet we don't get a hearing on anti-Semitism. We get a hearing generically on hate because this administration, and this is the kind of anger and hate that is encouraged. You're now seeing the hate manifesting right here. Interestingly enough, what...
Please, the committee will come to order. The senator is recognized to finish his remarks.
So we now have a demonstration of anti-Semitism. We have a demonstration of the hate. Rabbi Goldfelder, let me ask you, has the Biden administration cut off the funding of any of the colleges that have allowed this hate? Have they indicted anyone for funding these violent protests? Have they indicted the people paying for the matching tents? Or have they sat there silently, and have the universities sat there silently while their students are terrified to go to class?
They have not indicted anyone.
They have not indicted anyone. Has any university had their funding cut off for allowing this sort of violent intimidation?
Not a single university.
I can tell you this, next year,
Senator's
if there is
time
a
has
Republican
expired.
majority on this committee, you will see real leadership. And next year, if there's a Republican administration, you will see people prosecuted for this sort of violence. This is being tolerated with the looking away, the blind eye being turned from this administration and this Department of Justice. And it is utterly disgraceful. And under Title VI, any university that allows this should have their funding cut off.
Senator's time has expired. I would make a note for the record. This hearing is about hate. It includes anti-Semitism as well as hatred towards other people. I would also point out that the previous chair of the committee from the other side of the table didn't hold a single hearing on anti-Semitism or hate crimes. I've held multiple hearings addressing this subject since becoming chair, including a hearing shortly after the January 15th, 2022 synagogue hostage crisis in Colleyville, Texas, which featured testimony from the synagogue's rabbi. Senator Welch.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this hearing. The senator from Texas, I was with you in your indictment of all those horrendous anti-Semitic things that happened. You lost me when it seemed like you veered into a blame game. I think every single one of us here is horrified about hatred and violence towards a person because of what they believe or who they are. Now, in Vermont, we're pretty proud of being a tolerant state, but we have suffered significantly with anti-Semitic activity. It's horrifying. One of the things that's really terrifying to me is that when folks want to go to their synagogue, they have to have police security. You know, when I grew up going to Holy Name Grammar School, we didn't know what that was. We just went to church. And in Vermont, we had 3 young Palestinian men who were home visiting a grandmother for Thanksgiving. They were out walking. They were speaking Arabic. They had on a keffiyeh. They got shot. They got shot. I'm horrified at what has happened to them. I am horrified at the anti-Semitic escalation towards wonderful Vermonters who are Jews and what they have to endure and the insecurity that they feel. So my view here is that let's acknowledge every single one of us is horrified about the expression of hatred towards a Jew, towards a Muslim, towards an Arab, and try to figure out how best we can act. And that does include enforcement. But I have observed that any issue out there that can become a partisan issue often does. My view, that's not a solution. You know, I speak to some Vermonters from the Jewish community, so horrified, as we all are, about what happened, what Hamas did on October 7th. We have a teacher who had a student and was killed on October 7th, and she posted about it and suffered enormous online harassment. But when they had these 3 college boys who were just home for Thanksgiving and they got shot. I mean, all of us are absolutely horrified by that. And people who commit crimes, particularly hate crimes, they should be punished. But that should be, whether it's on campus, whether it's on the streets of Burlington, whether it's at a synagogue, we all have that obligation. Because that hatred is so corrosive to all of us and to our society. And if we, as a society, can't accept the collective responsibility that we each have for the well-being of one another, then it's not going to work. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the hearing, and I want to thank the witnesses, because you're struggling with it day by day. You're trying to help us find a way forward. But it's not going to be just a law that we pass. It's not just an indictment that we prosecute, and those things should be done. But it's going to be much more a collective responsibility that we have as citizens to one another. Let me just ask each of you what you think. What advice